Hello and welcome to the Swim England East Region podcast and episode 12. My name is Kevin and I'm the Regional Swimming Talent Officer and will be hosting today's discussion. Hopefully you are already following us on all our social media feeds, but if not, please make sure you give us a follow on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Swim England East Region. On today's episode, we are in conversation with Jasmine Campbell, who is our sports nutritionist for the Regional Development Programme. As with our other Q&A sessions, we've got live questions coming in from athletes and parents all across the region. This is the third of 3 episodes where we have live Q&As, so make sure you check out our psychology and S&C episodes if you're yet to do so. The link to the presentation that preceded this discussion is in the show notes, and make sure you click subscribe to the podcast so you're up to date as we launch more episodes. If you like what you hear, also give us a quick review. So let's get started with episode 12 of the podcast. It's a live Q&A and we are in conversation with Jasmine Campbell, this time talking all things nutrition. You'll notice at the start a slight delay in Jasmine joining the conversation, a power cut slowing down her efforts to get online, so I kick off the questions straight away with our swimmers relatively seamlessly until Jazz joins us. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, swimmers, welcome for our final call of this week. It's been a very interesting week with lots of different questions coming in. Jazz, our nutritionist, is actually having trouble logging in at the moment, but that's fine because she will be with us shortly. I can see lots of questions coming in already, which is really good. And also we've had obviously a lot of questions over the last couple of days with people dropping in questions in advance, which has been fantastic. So we've obviously sent those over. So I think one of the things that Jazz is going to talk about with us tonight is making sure that everybody understands that nutrition is very much an individual thing. So whilst there are some principles, I guess, that we all try and work from, is that everyone is going to be different. So it's not everyone should eat this or everyone should do that. We're going to talk about some basic principles, but actually, as you looked, or hopefully as you've all watched the video, you will have seen that it was very much a relaxed approach, and it wasn't everyone should do a certain thing. So I'm going to scroll through the chat box just to get us started. So Jazz will joining us in a minute. We've already got a question coming in about how much water should you drink during a session. Now, hydration is a huge part of nutrition. It really makes a big difference. So every single swimmer should be taking a drinks bottle to their swimming sessions, preferably a bigger one, not one of the tiny little stubby ones, but at least probably a litre. And the reason for that, it makes you lose so much water when you swim, which a lot of people aren't aware of, because obviously you don't feel like you're sweating when you swim, but as disgusting as it sounds, you actually are. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember, that we are losing water when we swim. So you've got to replenish it, because as much as your muscles need it, your brain needs it, and your body, just to actually process energy and process everything else that goes on inside it, needs water. So I would say if you're doing a standard 1 hour session, I would have at least a 3/4 of a litre bottle. And if you're doing a full 2 hours, certainly for swimmers when they're starting to swim every single day, you're probably going to go through 2 1 litre bottles within a session. And that doesn't mean 100 millilitres all the way through, and then when you get in the changing rooms, dropping the whole thing at the end, because obviously you might get indigestion or it might make you feel sick. So I think it's really important that swimmers are very mindful of that. I've got a question coming in about supplements already, which I know, again, Jazz will talk about, but actually for our youngsters, we are talking about a very much a food first approach. Unless you've got any specific deficiencies that are medically advised and your doctor says you need to take a specific supplement, there's absolutely no need to be taking additional supplements. So I think the model that, not just in swimming, but all young sports practitioners, or practitioners to say that work with young athletes, talk about making sure that it is a food first approach. We've just got a few more people joining us in the waiting room now, so excuse us for a second. Okay, I hope that answers the question about protein shakes, but I would include all supplements in that, not just protein shakes. We shouldn't be taking anything in addition that shouldn't really be able to be met by our diet. Most of us have pretty wide, varied diets, I'm sure. Okay, we've got quite a few questions coming in about, and not just tonight, but in previous nights, about before racing, before training, after racing, and all those sorts of things. And I think it's really important for swimmers to understand that, again, it's going to be an individual thing. So I know some swimmers that on their usual competition days won't eat maybe over an hour and a half before they race. So it's going to be very different. But then you'll have some swimmers that might actually like a small snack, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes before they race. It's going to be different for everybody. And it's the same thing afterwards. Some swimmers get out of the water and immediately want to eat something. Some swimmers like to swim down, have a shower, and then go and eat something. So I think in terms of timings to start with, it's going to be different for everybody. In terms of actually what you're eating, something Jazz talked about in a video, I believe, was things with a low glycemic index and a high glycemic index. And actually understanding that when you're eating things, it's not just all the same. There are some things that you can eat that will give you lots of sugar or carbohydrates, if we're going to go into the more technical terms. And there are other things that might actually be quite fatty. For example, you're probably not going to 45 minutes before a race eat a big bacon and sausage roll, but you might have a banana. Okay, so again, it's not just talking about when you're eating things, but actually thinking about what you're eating. And again, that's going to be different for everyone because you all like eating different things. So I think that's another area for us to consider. A couple more people in our waiting room. We're up to 45 people already. This is great. I'm still getting messages from Jazz trying to get in, having a technology meltdown at the moment, but it's fine. Luckily, I'm reasonably experienced in the world of nutrition, so I'll keep us going for now. A couple of things in terms of actually before and after, and this is something that I cannot emphasize enough. Don't wait until the big important meet to figure out what you eat running into or immediately after a race. And why I say that is because most of us, okay, if we discount the time we're in at the moment, but usually in a season, your most important meet isn't going to be the first meet that you swim in September or October. What it might actually be is, for example, counties or regionals, and you might have 10 or 15 or 20 different competitions before you get to that really important meet. So actually for swimmers, something to think about is, I've got a small competition coming up. It could even be club championships or level X, like we've got just started now. And actually it's a great opportunity to try out different things that you think work for you. And what you'll find is that sometimes things don't work for you, and that's okay. You learn from it, as we said about last night on the psychology stuff, and then we move on and change going forwards. But what I would say to everyone out there is making sure that when you get to the most important meet of the year, if you like, you want to have your routine absolutely nailed down. Okay, so you know that an hour before you race, you have a snack. You know that if you've got a morning session, you need to get up at 7 o'clock to have breakfast. And, you know, say it's going to be different for everybody. But again, use this time we've got now to kind of practice and refine those skills. Okay, we're going to start scrolling through some more of these questions. Is it best to have energy bars and protein bars after a swim race or something else? Now, I think if you actually look at what's in an energy bar, actually look at, you know, the different food sources that are within it, then actually some of those things can be homemade in, you know, different snacks or sandwiches, or again, it's going to be different for everybody. But you don't need to go and buy specific bottles of Lucozade, big expensive protein bars that say they do all these amazing things, because actually what they have in them is some carbohydrates, usually some protein, and then maybe a little bit of fats and then some nutrients. But actually, you can get that from just normal food. And when I say that, kind of fresh ingredients where you actually make things at home. So they do not, certainly at your age, need to become a necessity. Now, it's different if you're a professional athlete, you're traveling around the world, you're in parts of the world where you don't know what food is going to be available and all those sorts of things. They're really handy in those types of situations. But certainly when mum and dad are still packing your lunchbox, I think it's really, really important for us to realise that most of what we need, both pre-race and post-race, can be got from just a completely normal diet. Okay, got a question that's come in about eating during a competition. Now, this is obviously going to be different depending on the type of competition. So if we talk about a league as a great example, I might see an athlete on poolside eating pasta, okay, at a competition where they're only going to be there for like 2 hours and they're swimming 350s. Okay, now that's probably not the most appropriate thing to eat, because something like pasta is quite a starchy food and it actually takes quite a while to digest. So what then happens is that actually your body is trying to digest food whilst you're actually trying to prepare for a race. And you don't want those two things really happening simultaneously. You want all of that to have been done quite a long time beforehand. Now, if we take something like regionals, where you might swim at 10 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the final start at 6 o'clock in the evening. Now, there's a bit of a window there, maybe 4 or 5 hours between sessions sometimes, or between your races. So I think what's really important for all of us, again, to think about is actually, when I say eating during a competition, what do I actually mean by that? And again, I think that's going to be different for everybody. Now, I'm extremely happy to say that Jazz has finally managed to get out of the waiting room. Jazz, how are we doing?
Hello there.
How are you? You okay?
Good. I'm so sorry to keep everyone waiting. I had an absolute nightmare. I think they're doing something electrical on my street. So I've been running around like a headless chicken trying to get online.
That's okay. The good thing is we've already got through a few questions using my basic master's-based knowledge. So I think we've covered a few things already. We've talked about food first. We've talked about the difference is for different people. So sometimes on race day, someone might like eating a little closer to a race. Some people leave massive gaps. We've talked about supplements, because I've said really with our young athletes, we're looking at a food first approach. And the first question I've got to you is, what would you recommend before an early morning session? Over to you.
Okay, well, that's probably one of my favorite questions, because again, like you said, it comes down to the individual. And I think probably swimming has it really difficult. And if we think as ourselves, what can we stomach at that time in the morning? Probably it's not a lot. And I think it's very stressful when you're dropping off a young person at swimming, thinking they haven't had anything to eat and they're going to go and do a really hard training session. But what we have to remember is that if they have eaten well after their last session, maybe that might be the night before or the previous day, that morning. If they've eaten well, then they should have enough energy stored to support that training session. So maybe they can't stomach very much, but they'll be all right. It might be that they sort of struggle a little bit towards the end. If they can stomach something small, then I like to use liquids because they're easily emptied out of your stomach. So for example, even if they can just have a small glass of juice or a cup of milk, or just one slice of toast, that's better than nothing. So try that first. But definitely go for the liquids. And then it's really important when they finish that morning session that they then refuel really well afterwards.
Brilliant. There's a couple more questions that have come in about supplements. I don't know if you just want to expand a little bit more. I very much touched on the basics and that was it.
Yeah, that's fine. So what we have to remember is that supplements supplement our diet. So what we want to try, like what Kevin said earlier, is we want to try and get everything that we need from food first. The issue with supplements is that if we think, oh, I need calcium, so I'm going to supplement calcium, or I need protein, so I'm going to supplement protein. When we consume them only in the form of, say, protein, we're actually missing all the important vitamins and minerals that we get if we ate a whole protein source from something like chicken, fish, tofu, something like that. So actually limiting what we're having. The biggest issue with supplements is that they contain a contaminant risk. And what's really scary is if you think about the difference between medication and supplements. With medication, what is in the ingredients is in the product. With supplements, it's not the case. So we don't actually definitely know what is in the product. What it says in the ingredients is what we hope is in there, but there's nothing actually that verifies that for us. So what might happen is that supplement might be made in a factory that has used to process steroids or an illegal stimulant or something like that. that's illegal for an athlete. So we really want to protect them from consuming anything that we don't want them to, that could have a negative impact on them when they're older.
Jazz, just kind of picking up on that a little bit, because obviously most of the athletes in here are quite young, but we talk a little bit there about banned substances and things like that. And actually, can you just kind of flesh that out a little bit as to what, not necessarily at this age, but I mean, a lot of swimmers are probably this weekend going to be watching the ISL, and all those swimmers there are going to be tested every single week for what we call banned substances.
Yep, so those banned substances are substances that could potentially enhance performance. And they'll be tested to such a high level that could be almost, I guess, the equivalent of maybe a paracetamol tablet in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So they might not have enough of a substance to actually enhance their performance, but if they even get a tiny little bit of something that is on the ban list, then they could be excluded from competition. And it's actually really horrible consequences. They'll potentially be banned from anything from 2 to 4 years, or indefinitely from competing. And then it just carries around a really horrible stigma, even if they did it by accident, which is normally the case.
So I think for our youngsters out there, we're not in any way trying to panic you, but hopefully things like the ISL and stuff like that are going to become more commonplace in the years ahead. So perhaps by the time you're 17 or 18 or 19, you're competing on an international stage, you will be subject to testing. And again, if you know that you've had, fresh foods with no supplements and nothing, that you're not sure where it's come from and what's in it, you can be much more confident. So it's, again, just starting, I guess, a really good habit when they're young. Is that what we'd probably say, Jazz?
Yeah, I think so. And also, if we look at supplements, they probably only give us a 1 maximum % improvement in performance. So someone who's at the ISL, who has been training for many years, who probably has fantastic nutrition already and gets a lot of what they need from food first, and they eat the right food at the right times, then they might look at a supplement that could just push them that little bit further. Whereas for swimmers of this age, what would improve performance maybe 30% more is, eating enough carbohydrate, fueling their training sessions. There's some much bigger wins from focusing on a food first approach and getting those foundations nailed.
Okay, so just following on, I guess, like loosely attached to that, I've got a few questions already in about energy drinks, and I'm assuming we're covering Red Bull, Monster, Lucozade, Gatorade, all of those sorts of things. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, so there's a difference there. So we've got, if we put the Red Bull, the Monster, trying to think what else is similar to that.
Probably like Kick and things like that, the supermarket own brand ones.
Yeah, so they're in one box, and then we've got Lucozade in another box. So if we just think about the Monsters, Red Bulls, Kick, etc., those are energy drinks. They are normally fizzy. Contain some vitamins and minerals, and normally caffeine and another stimulant as well, taurine. The problem is that they can be quite addictive because of the caffeine in them. Sometimes they have a lot of sugar in them, so they have a lot of carbohydrate in them. So the idea is that, it gives you the energy, the fuel, but also makes you feel really awake as well through the caffeine. And they're quite popular with maybe teenage swimmers who have done their morning session, they've done a long day at school, and they know they've got an evening session, they're just feeling really tired. Those things are really attractive to them because they're going to get a kick from the caffeine, and they'll get a boost from the sugar in the drink. So the problem with those is they're not actually tested products, same way that we'd want a supplement to be tested. And also, if you're having caffeine that late in the day, it's going to have a negative impact on your sleep, whether it's going to make you not sleep as well, the quality, or it might take you longer to go to sleep too. And then I guess if we go to the Lucozade in the other box, yes, you can call it an energy drink. That is just carbohydrates, just sugar in that drink there. So potentially that might be quite useful if, for example, you're struggling to get a good carbohydrate source out and about or something, and you need to refuel after a big session. That might be when you use it. But all you'll get is just carbohydrate in a very pure form, but you wouldn't get anything. For example, if you had like a bowl of cereal, you could get the same amount of carbohydrate, but you get some other vitamins and minerals as well, too.
Okay, awesome. I've got a lot of questions, although we've got lots of timing kind of questions on here. A lot of it comes down to snacks. So if we just kind of flesh out the subject of snacks, and then I can start inserting some of the more details questions that we've got coming in.
Yep. So snacks are fantastic for swimmers, especially growing swimmers. Two reasons: because they're growing, they just need so much energy. To make somebody sit and eat that in 3 meals is going to be really labor intensive, and it's going to take them a long time to get through it. They might not be able to eat it all because they'll be too full. So snacks are a really good way at drip feeding all that food. And the other reason snacks are great for young swimmers is because they've not got many eating opportunities, and snacks provide extra eating opportunities throughout the day, just because of their long day at school, lots of traveling, and their training sessions. So do you want me to maybe give you an idea of some good snacks, or potentially?
I'm just looking through the questions, and there's quite a few that talk about before morning training or after evening training that are maybe a bit lighter, or in between races that are a bit lighter. So I guess when we talk about snacks, we're almost talking about just like light mini meals, aren't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a snack is just like a meal, it's a feed. So we need to think about what do we need at a certain time. So if we do around morning, let's say you're able to have a little snack of some fruit juice, milk, maybe you manage a cereal bar or half a banana before morning training, and afterwards again we want to have maybe another snack, another feed, and that could be a porridge pot, some overnight oats, a small bagel, something that's got something in, something like that. And then maybe in the evening after training. So this is really common again, that swimmers really struggle to eat after evening training. They might lose their appetite a little bit because it was a hard session and they're tired. And then also some swimmers do struggle to eat a large meal late in the evening and then go straight to sleep. So again, we might be able to be clever and do things like sort of mega smoothies, I call them. And the reason for this is the liquid is easier to digest and empty out of your stomach. So you can make almost like a meal in a smoothie for evening training. So it could be milk-based, so a lot of vitamins and minerals, protein, carbohydrate. And then it could have some oats in it, some honey, some banana, some frozen berries. It could be nice and sweet and refreshing. And then a swimmer can sort of chug that in the car on the way back from training. Then that means that they've gained some time when they get back in the house. They don't have to sit down and eat a meal, which means that they get to bed sooner and then they can help with their recovery that way. So that's probably one of my favorite tips for the evening training session. And again, if you have got a long commute home in the evening, even if it's half an hour, there's no reason why the swimmer can't do their recovery feed, and it could look like a few snacks rather than a sit down meal. I definitely think swim parents always feel guilty, like they should, their swimmer should have a sit down breakfast, a sit down lunch, sit down dinner, whereas in reality that's pretty impossible to happen. So there's no reason why you can't have that evening meal, that post training dinner or recovery feed in the car on the way home, and it might look like a series of snacks.
Okay, so a thing there, I guess, for swimmers is that some of this will come down to preparation, I guess, because if they know, I know some, just looking at some of the clubs on here, obviously they're quite spread out. Some are in quite rural areas, and they maybe do travel 20, 30, 40 minutes to and from training sessions. So, you know, if they're getting out the pool at, let's say, 9 o'clock at night, being able to have by 9:05 had a feed in whatever you want to call it, whether that's a sandwich, a smoothie, a piece of fruit, whatever it is, whilst they're sitting in the car for those 20, 30, 40 minutes, their body is actually already going, thank you very much, I can start recovering. And I think looking at, say, a lot of the young swimmers on here, it's a great thing to get into a habit of planning ahead and making sure you've got enough supplies, if we want to call it that, with you, whether it's an evening session, whether it's a morning session and you go straight to school, or it's a competition and you can't go back to the hotel or go off to a restaurant. So no, that's really, really fascinating. We've got a lot of questions coming in, which is great. 29 currently.
All right.
Okay, we've got lots of questions about snacks before race. Now, I mentioned briefly about things to do with glycemic indexes and sugar spikes before they get on the block. So do you just want to touch on that with a little bit more science than my waffling?
I think you probably did a good job, Kevin. You've heard me talk enough about nutrition. You should be an expert now. But yeah, that's absolutely right. So what we're trying to do, what we do around nutrition, around training day to day, which is the absolute bulk of our year, is is very different to what we do on competition day. Competition day is about being as comfortable as possible and maintaining energy levels so that we can really focus on what we want to do race wise. Everyone always asks me, oh, what can I do to swim faster on race day? What do I eat on race day? What do I eat on race day? And I think, well, actually, if you think about all the other days of the year where you're doing your training, that's where you can have your biggest improvements in performance by focusing on your nutrition around training. So really, what we can do nutrition wise on race day is actually harm performance if we mess around with it too much. And you might find with some of your swimmers that they actually, what they're doing is what's right for them. They already know what to do in terms of how much to eat, when, and what foods they prefer. So, and I think one thing to be super sensitive of with your swimmer is that the level of anxiety or excitement that they're feeling at that race or that event is going to have an impact on their
No, Mummy told me to take it out so we could.
So we need to be careful that we don't force them to eat more than they want. That might make them feel frustrated or irritated or slow them down because they'll feel too full. So really, I think the simplest tip is to, I say, nibble, nibble, sip, sip through race day. So the reason for that is that it allows you to just take on as much as you need without being over full or overhydrated, anything like that. Where we might focus a lot on eating all the colours of the rainbow, good fats, good sources of protein, and obviously lots of carbohydrates in training days, where that differs on race day is that, yes, we want carbohydrate. We don't need it in the form of jelly babies or jelly cubes, etc. We just need some little carbohydrate snacks that aren't going to spike blood sugar massively, and that they're just like little snacks that we can have all the way throughout the day just to maintain that energy. If your swimmer is doing a race for 40 seconds, 2 minutes, that's such a short distance that they're not completely depleting their energy stores, so they don't need to massively fill them back up again. And then probably the last thing that I think that everyone forgets is when there's a lunch break on race day, it's really important to remember that that lunch break is for the officials. It's not for the swimmers. Let's give the officials a break and they will go off and eat sandwiches and pasta salads and stuff like that. But the swimmer doesn't necessarily then have to eat lunch foods and eat what they would for lunch in terms of a portion size. So they might just have a few snacks over that hour and a half period. If they're hungry and they want to eat.
So if we're looking, I guess if we flesh that out a little bit and say 2 heat sessions at competitions and then finals in the evening, and they're swimming a couple of races in each one of those, then actually it could look like small breakfast snack, race number 1, another small snack, race number 2, maybe a slightly bigger snack as there's a bit more of a gap, then some more snacks in the afternoon. And we're saying snacks here, we're not meaning something ridiculously unhealthy, but something that you can stomach between your races. But then you've got, let's say you're at regionals, for example, you're going to have, let's say that competition finishes at 8 o'clock and warm-up's not till 8 o'clock the next day. That's where you've got your 12-hour gap. So it's really important we get our heads around this concept that the day that we usually have on a competition day can be turned on its head a little bit. So don't, like I said, the volume of time I go to competitions and I see swimmers at a 2 or 3 hour event eating pasta, and I'm thinking, guys, this is not going to make any difference. If anything, it's going to slow you down. So actually just being mindful of what you're eating and when you're eating and when your windows are, I think is really, really helpful. So no, it's really good insights there, Jazz. Thank you. Right. Good couple of questions coming in directly to me here about vegetarian food and vegan food. Now, in terms of specifics, obviously, please go into some, but could you recommend a book? Because what I'm doing is I'm sending out resources next week, once I've got all these together, that have, I guess, a few additional resources for our swimmers and their parents. So if we're talking vegetarian and vegan food, what's the best book out there that's going to help parents?
I really, really like as a resource for any vegan or vegetarian athletes I work with. There's two. The one by Anita Bean, and it's called the Vegetarian Athlete. I think I can double check for you. But it has a little bit of information about nutrients that are a bit more challenging to get on a more plant-based diet. So those nutrients are important for both vegans and vegetarians. And then it also gives a lot of vegetarian recipes, but actually when you look at what's in them, a lot of them are vegan or they're really easily made vegan. So if you're thinking, oh no, I'm vegan, I'm not vegetarian, they're still really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Because you said there was two.
Well, she's got a runner's cookbook
Okay.
for vegetarians. And I think if you're just looking for some recipes, you might as well get the other one too, because then there's just more recipes. It's aimed at runners, but there's no reason why you can't use those recipes.
Brilliant. Okay, we've got somebody has really paid attention in the video. The video said, and they're pointing their finger at you as they say this,
Yeah.
it was okay to snack an hour before swimming. Would it apply to a full meal?
Now, it really depends on the individual. So, I mean, I feel like some of the younger boys that I've worked with can do crazy things like eat huge meals and then just dive straight in the pool. And then when I work with a senior male swimmer, they're like, absolutely not. So I think it just depends on, I guess, the rate of digestion and what that swimmer can do. So if they want to have a full meal and they feel like they can digest it in time, great, but probably they can't so much. So whether they break that up into two smaller portions and move one earlier on, or just make out of snacks, or again like that sort of mega smoothie where they have it so it's more easily digested.
Okay, quite a few more energy drink questions, which hopefully we've covered already. Another one about snacks, although this one's a little bit more specific. If you're feeling ill, what would you recommend snack-wise?
Oh, first thing, if you wake up feeling a bit, I think you're talking about coughs and colds. If you wake up feeling a little bit run down, the most important thing you can do is one, make sure you're getting plenty of fluids. And then make sure that you eat as much as you can that day, as in don't skip any meals. Make sure there's plenty of eating opportunities, you've got lots of snacks, and preferably choose carbohydrates in those snacks. So your immune system uses carbohydrates as its fuel source. And then try and pick some nice nutrient dense foods that are high in, say, vitamin C and also zinc. So we think about vitamin C, that's strawberries, mangoes, oranges, kiwis, red pepper, pineapple. If you're thinking about zinc, that's things like yogurt and milk, lentils, lamb, chickpeas. Yeah, so the link's a bit more random, but yeah, so just having some nutrient dense foods that day. So even if you get like a nice fruit smoothie, have plenty of fluids, and then really think about your sleep and think about how much you're training that day. So you definitely need to have a conversation with your coach. I know it can be quite daunting for young swimmers who don't want to say that they feel a bit poorly. They might just need to ease off that day, but actually just easing off slightly that day and communicating with your coach that you feel like that might, mean that you're actually back to swimming full sooner.
Okay, there's another question about more generally amount of training running down the immune system, and obviously coming into winter with one or two viruses floating around at the moment. Can we recommend, just from a general immune maintenance point of view, what would we recommend for the swimmers to be thinking about?
I know it sounds really boring, but having a wide diet where you're eating plenty of nutrients, lots of fruit and vegetables, fresh fruit and vegetables. Another one, this is a little bit tricky to talk about because we were discussing that we need to be careful about supplements for young swimmers. But one that is proving pretty good for immunity is vitamin D that we don't get in the winter.
Is that because we live in England and it's miserable and rainy and cloudy all the time?
Yeah, that is it, especially in the winter. Yeah. So in the summer, we're absolutely fine, but we need to get vitamin D in the winter. So we have some food sources, but it's quite hard to get the amount we need per day, even if we ate all the food sources that day. So that's things like, but definitely include it in your diet. That's eggs. salmon, mushrooms, and cow's milk contain vitamin D. So definitely include those in your diet anyway, if you can. And then it might be one that you would look to supplement yourself or for your swimmer as well.
Awesome. Okay, another question about energy drinks, which again, I think we've touched on enough already, but hopefully the message is getting across loud and clear for your age, and certainly for the type of swimming we're doing and our development journey. We don't need to be worrying about energy drinks right now. Can you, I guess, just talk a little bit, if we go back to like the Lucozade example, because they say, well, it gives me energy. Can we talk a little bit, I guess, around actually what an energy drink could look like that's perhaps a little bit healthier and appropriate for young athletes?
Oh yeah, if you've got a swimmer that's saying to you like, oh, but it gives me energy, I think it gets not addictive, but you get that, you experience that nice, especially younger swimmers. The way their metabolism works is that when they have they're not able to store carbohydrates as well as adults. So a lot of sort of the nutritional advice is prepping them for when they're older. It's definitely applicable now. But if they have something like simple carbohydrates like sugar that is a Lucozade sport, for them it makes them more hyper than it would an adult. Their body will be like, right, we're going to make use of this energy we've just got, and they will feel like they're able to exert themselves more in swimming. So it's quite a nice feeling for them. They can go and smash out that session, they feel good. But it might mean that they're not very good for the second hour of the session, or they start tailing off, or they start like struggling to concentrate. So it might be better to think about other carbohydrate sources. So there's no reason why they can't have, I don't know, a glass of orange juice and a banana or something. That would actually give them some other vitamins and minerals along with the carbohydrate that's easily digested.
Okay, fantastic. A lot of questions about water, and I did touch on hydration at the start of it, but can we just kind of give our swimmers a little bit of an overview on, not just from a swimming point of view, but actually across the day, why is water so important?
Yeah, well, we're just basically bags of salty water. That's what we are. We're 70% water. It's our blood is 90% water, so it's a transportation system. So if we just take the blood, for example, if we're dehydrated, it becomes thicker and it's harder for our body to pump round, for our heart to pump it around our body. So therefore the transportation of nutrients and fluids and hormones and signals is actually harder, so that's not working as effectively. If you can just imagine a brain not in the skull, it's like super wet, slimy, wobbly tissue. That's because it's, again, really largely made of water. So can you imagine your brain in your skull, which is responsible for how you feel, how happy you feel, your ability to concentrate and react and take on information and listen, etc., and control your body to do things in the pool to make you swim faster. If you think about this big wet tissue in your head, if it gets a bit dehydrated, it actually shrinks a little bit and it's not as effective. And it might be that you have to get even more dehydrated, then you get a headache and you feel tired and stuff. It's quite amazing the amount of people that I've worked with where I've gone, oh, I really don't think they're drinking enough fluids. And just by increasing it, they're going, oh, I've got so much energy. I just feel so much better. And you're like, I haven't even done anything yet. We're just making sure you're drinking more fluid.
So what does that look like for, say, I talked to the swimmers at the start about the amount of for a training session, but if we split it in half, what should young people be drinking roughly in terms of water? And I'm not going to say fluid because I can already hear the cans of Coke opening and going, well, it's fluid.
Okay, shall I define what I think is fluid? So no, it's not can of Coke, no, it's not Monster, and it's not wine or beer either for the parents. But it is things like milk, fruit juice, squash, obviously water. Those are your fluids. You could have tea and coffee too. They actually would count towards your fluid as well. But I haven't met many young swimmers who have a couple of cups of tea a day. So you've got your fruit, your milk, and just squash in your water. So that counts as your fluid there, or those would count as your fluid. So if we're thinking of maybe like a 13-year-old swimmer or a 12-year-old swimmer, I'd expect them to have at least 3 of their sports bottles a day. So the ones they take to the pool with them, at least 3 of them a day, and if not, that as a minimum. So if you can imagine the fruit juice, the milk you drink, the water and squash, add it up for the whole day and be able to get it into 3 of those bottles, if not more, great. But yeah, definitely have a little go at just like trying to do like a week where you're just consciously drinking a little bit more and see how you feel. Because it might have a much bigger impact on your swimming performance and just how you feel in yourself anyway.
Fantastic. I've got a quite a sciencey question here actually, and then I think we can rein it back slightly. And they're asking about windows of recovery, specifically with protein. But if we just talk about windows of recovery, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So if we think about when we are in the training session, we are challenging our body. And then it's after the session, really our body's saying, oh, that was really hard. I want to be able to do that next time. I want to be better and be able to do that. And then I'm going to put those changes in place to adapt to make sure I am better. And your body's a little bit beat up after the training session, so it wants to repair and recover. So after training, it needs the right energy, or it needs plenty of energy and the right nutrients. And those nutrients are fluids, water, carbohydrate, and protein as well. So when we finish training, and this is for adults as well, our bodies are super efficient at making those changes and refilling up our fuel tank and rehydrating and going to work and repairing our muscles. And if we were to, let's say we finish training in the evening, we're like, I'm not that hungry. I'll have a couple of sips of water. I'll get in the car for half an hour, 40 minutes. I'll get out and then I've got to heat up my food. That's another 15 minutes. I have a couple of mouthfuls because it's not really food that I like and I don't want to be too full before bed. And then I get into bed, but then I'm on my phone. All of that you're really delaying everything. You're actually missing these windows that are open to help you refuel, rehydrate, and rebuild. So if I talk about immediately when you finish a session, your body is super efficient at putting carbohydrates back in your fuel tank. And it's really efficient at helping you rehydrate. So straight away, we're looking to have a small carbohydrate snack, shortly followed by either carbohydrate in our dinner or some more snacks. And then we want to start off the rehydrating by sort of slowly filling in those fluids by just having water or squash to keep sipping on for the next hour or so. And then we want to make sure we have a protein source. So we will want to make sure we have that good protein source, which is about palm-sized portion of your hand of meat or fish. You want to have it about an hour after training, an hour and a half, and that will stimulate your muscles to build and recover too.
Okay. Just had another person drop back in on the waiting room, but hopefully they're back in and joined us. Got a question here about, is having 3 drinks bottles too much for a 2-hour session? But I guess we're talking about volume of liquid, because I'd imagine some of our swimmers have quite little drinks bottles and some of us have huge drinks bottles. So is it more to do with volume?
I think so when I said, so how much should a swimmer drink, I was talking about over a whole day. So as a minimum, it should be 3 of the sort of, the 2-hour bottles of like 750 ml, 800 ml bottles. So 3 of those over the course of a whole day. I absolutely work with swimmers who take 2 of those and can nearly get through 2 in a 2-hour session. Because they're thirsty drinkers and they like to do that. So they'll always take 2 bottles with them. So if they finish the first one within an hour, 45 minutes, they've still got another one that they can tuck into for the last 15 minutes of session. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then I guess we're not just talking about a 2-hour session, because obviously if they're getting changed, they're doing pre-pool, they're driving 25 minutes or half an hour in each direction. Actually, a 2-hour training session could be nearly 4 hours of their evening. So it's not just for the actual swimming up and down bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to have to go back to it because it's a very direct question. Is Lucozade bad?
No, I don't think it's not necessarily bad. It could be useful in some situations. I wonder because I haven't really seen many swimmers recently asking or challenging me on Lucozade Sport. Maybe it's making a bit of a comeback. No, I don't think it's bad. It's just sugary water. You could just make it yourself if you just made really strong squash or use lots of honey and water, for example. It's just carbohydrate, sugary water. Um, it's just, if you have it, you're not going to get any other vitamins and minerals, and swimmers really struggle with eating opportunities. So preferably there's better choices. It would be like my C choice to my A choice, my top rated choice. So
Okay. A question about dairy. If you are lactose intolerant, or you just don't have dairy products in your diet, what kind of alternatives are we looking at? Because again, we're not just talking about things like protein and fats, we're also talking about minerals that potentially you're missing out on. So what's your advice on that front?
Yep. So I think we should always be really careful about cutting out whole food groups, and dairy is a food group. And dairy is a food group that is really useful for growing athletes because of the types of vitamins and minerals in there. So if you are lactose intolerant, there's a great range. It's got the cow on the front and it's like green and white. And that's lactose free. So lactose is a type of sugar in the milk, and they've just taken that out. And some people are intolerant to that. So I would just swap to those sources. You still get the same vitamins, minerals, protein, and carbohydrate in them. If you are more plant-based, then I would recommend the next best swap to cow's milk or dairy is fortified soya milk. So it's got to be fortified because then it's got the added vitamins and minerals that soya milk's missing, but it's almost as close in terms of protein and carbohydrates and vitamins and minerals as cow's milk. So it'd be really important that you consciously chose to do that. If you went from soy milk to almond milk, really almond, oats, rice milk is just so low in calories, it wouldn't be appropriate for a young swimmer. It would deny them of the calories they get from soya milk or cow's milk, as well as the vitamins and minerals. They're just very watery. They're great for an adult who works at office who just wants a bit of milk in their coffee or something, but not for a young swimmer. It's got to be fortified soy milk or cow's milk.
Okay, fantastic bit of advice there. I've got a question about inhalers. Whoever asked that, can you clarify a little bit more about what you mean? Because then we can hopefully answer that one. We've got a question actually about the day before a gala, but let's expand that question out and actually talk about I'm racing this weekend. What should I have been thinking Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday?
Okay, so we're coming up to the race weekend. Really, we need to make sure, even if we're doing slightly lighter training sessions, if you are a young swimmer, this is where it'd be different to a senior swimmer. A young swimmer would still need to fuel really well after the light sessions. And the reason for that is because they're growing, they have that extra energy requirement to support their growth. For example, the swimmers in the ISL, they're senior swimmers, they're not growing anymore. They, relative to their size, have a less energy requirement. So they might, whilst their training is taper, they might actually eat slightly less towards their race. But the dangerous thing of doing that if you're a growing swimmer is you might get to the end of the week and feel really tired. You're at a bigger risk of injury and illness. So leading up to race weekend, after your training sessions, you need to be fueling really well. You want to maintain hydration over those days so you don't have any dips in hydration level. And then to take you up to the day before swimming gala is, again, you want to, maybe just purposely eat a few more snacks, and they could be carbohydrate based, like rice cakes, an extra slice of toast here, a glass of orange juice there, a little cereal bar here, just feature in maybe a couple more little snacks just to make sure you've got that energy stored on board for the next day. And then you can just do your little bites and your little sips throughout race day the next day.
Fantastic. I've got a question really about vitamins. So it says, what are the most important vitamins to get during the day? So obviously huge topic area, as there's quite a few vitamins, but if we can just talk about, I guess, vitamins and minerals in general, what's your kind of thoughts on that for young athletes?
Yeah, no problem. I'm a little bit worried my internet was dipping out then, so sorry if I break up, just tell me. Important vitamins and minerals is really, they are all important. We just need them in different amounts. So really we should be trying to get absolutely all the vitamins and minerals we need, because they have all different functions, and being low in one can have a negative impact on another one, etc. So really there's no ones that are more important than the others. I definitely have some that I know young swimmers struggle to get a bit. And that's probably things like calcium, just because of the not all swimmers, but some particularly might struggle, because we want to really develop our bone mass whilst we're young, and this carries on into our 20s. So having a good feed of calcium every day, if not twice, is really good. So that could be a large glass of milk or a yogurt. And there's other vitamins and minerals you get from the yogurt and the milk that will support growth as well.
Okay, so hopefully you've all been taking notes there. Right, another question about water, which you've already done. Okay, question about skipping foods, or I guess missing meals after a morning session. Is that going to affect the rest of the day?
If you don't eat after that morning session, yes, it will have a negative impact on the day, because you won't be able to recover as well. You're compromising your immune system slightly then, because your whole body's been stressed. You might put yourself at a bigger risk of injury, especially if you keep this up regularly. And it will have a negative impact on the rest of the day, because and I'm sure everybody on this call has done this, where we have rushed around all morning, we haven't eaten enough food, and then get to the evening and we are hungry. So we're more likely to eat food that we don't need, that isn't that nutritious, that's going to make us feel good quickly. And then we're probably going to eat a lot more than what we need, and then that might have an impact. Let's say we don't eat very well in the day, we come to our evening session, we're going to be craving Lucozade Sport or a Monster, or we're going to want to eat a bag of sweets before we do our evening session, or we're going to think, oh, I'd normally just have a crumpet with some peanut butter and jam, but because you didn't eat very well early in the day, you're going to be like, I'm going to have 3 crumpets, and then feel sick for the first hour of training and not be able to push yourself. So
okay, I've got a question here that I hope it's a question more directed to you than just a poll, because that's what it feels like. It says, are milkshakes or smoothies better? And I feel like I'm on a Taskmaster or something here.
oh my God, we could we could actually do a little vote using the reaction.
I'll tell you what, you answer that question, and I'm going to have a go at putting that poll up for everybody to answer.
Okay. So our smoothies, what was it? Sorry, smoothies and milkshakes. So I guess they could actually really be very similar. So milkshakes, we've got they could just be milk mixed with Nesquik. They could be the shop bought ones. In terms of a smoothie, I normally think of a smoothie being fruit based, so maybe some fruit juice and then some whole fruit blended up. So it's 2 different products, but then again, a smoothie could contain milk. So neither is for me better than the other, but I definitely know some athletes prefer different ones. So milkshake, we're going to get probably a good source of protein in there, along with the carbohydrates, whereas a smoothie is a fantastic way of getting lots of vitamins and minerals and then some carbohydrate too.
Okay, so if we think that a little bit, because obviously, again, going back, we talked about planning earlier, and actually a lot of our swimmers have a whole week's training planned out in front of them, so they could say, one day I'm going to have this, one day I'm going to have that. They're going to mix it up. So again, I guess, do you think some of this comes down to actually planning ahead, instead of just, like you said, coming in from maybe a long day at school and they've not thought ahead and they haven't had the right thing at lunchtime or whatever it is, and then they suddenly go for quick, easy food that perhaps isn't the best choice?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes maybe swimmers, you're not that good at communicating with your parents what you need as well, because you've got lots of other stuff going on. That's fine. But there'd be no harm in just looking at the week, where thank God we're back to a routine now where we've got our school, our college, and we've got training sessions, whether they're in the pool or they're out. So what would be great is if you maybe look at your week as 7 days, Monday to Sunday, and then you pinpoint all your eating opportunities in your timetable. And then you can have a little look and say, oh yeah, do you know what? I am going to try and have half a glass of juice. I know I don't normally have anything. Let's try and put that here. And actually, look, there's 5 hours where I'm not eating anything. That really needs to be broken up with a snack or a smoothie or milkshake. So,
okay, awesome. Interesting question here. Are milkshakes homemade with cow's milk and ice cream okay to have before a race?
I'm going to say the reason why no ice cream before the race is because ice cream fat is slightly harder to digest, especially for a race. So that's why we like to have carbohydrates, because protein and fat just take a bit longer to empty out the tummy and feel more heavy. So ice cream, probably not, but a homemade milkshake might be fine about an hour before or an hour and a half before, but we need to allow time.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So whether it's training or whether it's competitions, we're going to say no ice cream directly before you get in the pool. And I'm sure there's a lot of swimmers hanging their head in disappointment. I've got a couple more questions that I want to get through. Got a really good one about actually a recipe. So banana, cocoa powder, peanut butter, chia seeds and milk is a good recovery drink. Yes or no?
Yeah, that sounds delicious. I'll have one of those, please.
Yeah, if you can send that. Thanks for sharing that recipe.
Good.
Just going back to our poll, we've had 36 people reply to the milkshake or smoothie poll, and 75% of you are going for the smoothie. So we're going to leave that open for another minute. If you haven't voted yet, make sure your vote comes in because they all count. Right, I mentioned about the inhaler and we talked about banned substances. Now, somebody has asked about supplements and what happens if you need to take medications such as a steroid-based inhaler. Now, are you comfortable answering that?
Well, I can answer it, and the answer is that my area is nutrition and nutritional supplements. So my sports doctors that I work with, who work with the swimmers, they would be responsible for saying, yes, this athlete needs this. It's an important medication to them. And they would sign it's called a TUE. So it's like a certificate to say, I have prescribed this, or this has been rightly prescribed and this athlete needs it. So I'm sure some of the swimmers for the ISL will have some TUEs for medication that they have to take, but it's not something you need to worry about at this level. So
yeah, so I'm just again giving you guys some examples. Having been at all the different levels of domestic meat in this country, you probably would not even hear of drugs testing taking place until British Championships, which is the most senior meet in this country. And even then, it would likely only be happening with the senior finalists, i.e. athletes that are likely to go to a World Championships or an Olympics or an ISL. So again, it's just something to be aware of at a young age, but certainly don't worry about it. I'm getting direct messages coming through saying smoothies are better. No, milkshakes are better. The poll would indicate 74% have gone for smoothies. So that is the clear winner of tonight's discussion. Okay. There is one more question and it's another Lucozade one. Are you talking about the original Lucozade or the isotonic Lucozade? Now that's a technical question.
So when you're saying the original Lucozade, is that the orange fizzy one? If so, that's more like having a can of Coke. I wouldn't have anything fizzy before training because that can cause you sort of a lot of indigestion issues. So we try and avoid having fizzy drinks before training anyway, regardless of what they are. The isotonic one is the Lucozade Sport. So that's the still one that's orange, normally orange, there's other flavors. Very sweet drink. I was talking about the Lucozade Sport, the still one.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we've got a few things that I'm going to send out next week. So I'll send out an audio summary from this call today. I'll also send out the notes about the books that you've mentioned. You've obviously did during lockdown some fantastic videos that are actually on Swim England's YouTube channel. So if you just want to give us a quick overview about those.
Wow, that really feels like a long time ago now. How crazy is that? So I know I did one nutrition for now because I had a lot of swimmers panicking. They thought, I'm not in the pool or I've not got my normal routine. And I guess this really applies for any period. If you are in any of the areas where, you know, I don't know if anyone on this call is in the areas where we've gone into almost like another lockdown as such, or if it ever happens, it's absolutely fine. We don't need to panic nutrition wise. We just need to maintain those good habits, especially at this age. So I did a nutrition for now, but definitely watch it. It's got some useful tips for maybe home training and stuff like that, and things that you can use for in the pool. Then I'm pretty sure I did another one on making pancakes at home because they're probably my favorite thing to have as like breakfast before training. Or if I did a training session on a Sunday morning and I wanted a big recovery feed afterwards, I definitely go for these pancakes. They're made out of bananas, oats, and egg. Rather than getting out flour and having to weigh it all, they're pretty foolproof and you can make as many as you want and have them with whatever you want as well.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I include the links to those in the notes that go out as well. So the audio recording from today's call, including the poll results, and all the links will go out on our YouTube channel next week, as well as at all our podcast channels, which you can all probably access through your phones. And I will also include the contact information for Jazz if parents have got any more questions. But for now, swimmers, thank you so much again for a lot of questions coming in, which have been awesome. Make sure you join us on Wednesday night next week, where we're going to have a conversation with myself and the head coach for the regional program this year. And again, lots of exciting things you can ask there. And we're going to talk about anything swimming related within reason. So make sure you start thinking about those questions over the weekend. But for now, thank you very much, Jazz, for sharing your time with us tonight. And swimmers, thank you so much for some amazing questions. Thank you again to Jasmine there for some wonderful insights, and again to our swimmers for such great questions. All the contact information you need for Jazz, as well as some useful links, are in the show notes for you. I know Jazz is particularly active, sharing some great tips on Twitter, so make sure you give her a follow. We love hearing back from our listeners and growing the network that we can support, so please make sure you share the link to this podcast with your friends and add some comments on our social media so we know what you thought. Hopefully you did enjoy the episode and will join us again soon for the Swim England East Region podcast.